A godly man begins his journey with identity. You can't live like a king if you think like a beggar. Too many men are walking around trying to figure out who they are because they've been listening to the wrong voices. The world says you're defined by your job, your money, or your status, but God says you're defined by His purpose. Until you understand that truth, you'll keep chasing validation that will never satisfy you. When you wake up each morning, you've got to remind yourself, I am a child of God. That means you walk differently, talk differently, and think differently. You don't have to compete with anyone because you already have divine value. You don't need a title to prove your worth. Your creation already proves it. When you know whose you are, you stop acting like a man lost in the crowd. Knowing who you belong to also shapes how you respond to challenges. Life will try to break your confidence, people will doubt your ability, and circumstances will test your faith. But a godly man stands firm because his confidence isn't rooted in himself. It's rooted in the one who made him. When you know your source, you stop fearing scarcity. A godly man doesn't depend on people to validate him. He knows that opinions change, but God's approval never does. You could lose your position, your income, even your reputation, but as long as you haven't lost your relationship with God, you still have power. A godly man measures his success by obedience, not applause. This kind of confidence changes how you move in every area of life. You don't have to mimic anyone because authenticity becomes your strength. You no longer live for people's acceptance. You live for God's purpose. And when you do that, peace follows. Your identity becomes your anchor. Without it, the world will toss you around with every new trend and temptation. But when you stand on who God says you are, you're unshakable. You're no longer just surviving life, you're leading it with conviction. So before you try to fix the world, fix your focus. Remember who you are, and more importantly, remember whose you are. That's where every godly man's story begins. A man can't call himself godly if he only calls on God when life gets rough. Building a relationship with God is not a weekend hobby. It's a daily discipline. It means making time to pray, not just when things go wrong, but when everything's going right. You don't build a strong house in the middle of a storm. You build it before the clouds gather. A real man wakes up and says, God, I can't do this day without you. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Because the moment you start thinking you can handle life on your own, that's the moment pride sneaks in and sets you up for a fall. Prayer keeps you grounded. It reminds you that no matter how strong or successful you get, you still need divine direction. Your relationship with God grows through communication, consistency, and surrender. You can't just show up on Sundays and expect a 7-day blessing. Spend time reading His Word, talk to Him like you talk to your closest friend, and listen when He speaks through conviction or circumstances. The truth is, a man who spends time with God walks differently. There's a calm about him, a confidence that's not loud but steady. That's because he knows where his help comes from. When other men panic, he prays. When others quit, he keeps going because his strength comes from something greater than himself. The more you talk to God, the more you'll hear Him. The more you listen, the more you'll recognize His hand in your life. You'll start noticing doors opening, opportunities aligning, and peace showing up in the middle of chaos. That's not coincidence. That's connection. Building a relationship with God doesn't mean you won't face storms. It means you'll have peace inside them. You'll still have struggles, but you won't be shaken. Because when you know God personally, you stop seeing Him as distant. You start walking with Him daily. A godly man's strength isn't in how loud he can shout. It's in how quiet he can be before God. That relationship is where your real power is born. A godly man doesn't just talk about doing right, he lives it. Leadership is not about commanding people, it's about influencing them through your actions. Your family, your coworkers, your community, they're watching how you handle life. They're learning what faith looks like by how you live. It's easy to give advice, but it's harder to live by it. You can't tell your son to be disciplined if you're inconsistent. You can't tell your daughter to choose wisely if you live recklessly. You can't demand respect while refusing to live respectfully. Real leadership starts with your daily habits, not your speeches. When you lead by example, you don't have to force people to follow. They're drawn to your consistency. The world's filled with noise, but what gets people's attention is authenticity. Be the man who does what he says, who keeps his word, and who stands firm even when it's uncomfortable. Your leadership at home sets the tone for your household. A godly man doesn't rule with fear, he leads with faith and love. He listens, he protects, and he prays for his family. He's not perfect, but he's present. And that presence brings stability that money can't buy. When you lead with integrity, you become a mirror of God's strength. You're showing your children that manhood is not domination, it's discipline. You're teaching them that love is not weakness, it's power under control. Even when you fail, own it. A leader's humility teaches more than his success ever could. When your family sees you apologize, pray, and keep trying, they see that grace is stronger than pride. The greatest leaders aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones who live in alignment with what they believe. A godly man doesn't just talk about the word. He walks it out every single day. A godly man owns his life. He doesn't waste time blaming others for what went wrong. He looks at his mistakes, learns, and adjusts. Responsibility is not about perfection. It's about maturity. When you stop blaming, you start growing. It's easy to point fingers. It's hard to look in the mirror and admit, I could have done better. But growth doesn't come from excuses. It comes from accountability. A man who takes responsibility invites God into his process of change. And that's where transformation begins. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting for someone to save you. You realize God already gave you the tools to move forward: faith, wisdom, and perseverance. Excuses delay your destiny. Responsibility activates it. A responsible man doesn't hide from his past. He faces it with faith. He says, yes, I made mistakes, but those mistakes don't define me. They refine me. God can't fix what you won't face. When you own your truth, God can use your story to help someone else heal. Responsibility also means showing up even when you don't feel like it. Your family, your commitments, your purpose, they all depend on your consistency. You can't be a godly man if you're only faithful when it's convenient. Sometimes responsibility will stretch you. It will challenge your pride, demand your patience, and test your character. But each time you rise to the occasion, you grow stronger. You become more reliable, more trustworthy, more like Christ. The difference between a boy and a man is accountability. A boy runs from correction, a man receives it and grows. A godly man knows that responsibility is not a burden. It's a blessing that shapes him for greatness. Your heart is the steering wheel of your life. Whatever drives it determines where you end up. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your life. He just needs to distract your heart. That's why the Bible says, above all else, guard your heart. Guarding your heart doesn't mean closing yourself off. It means being selective about what you allow inside. You can't expect peace if you constantly feed your soul chaos. The shows you watch, the people you hang around, the words you entertain, all of it shapes the condition of your heart. A godly man protects his heart by protecting his environment. You can't surround yourself with negativity and expect positivity to grow. Sometimes guarding your heart means walking away from what feels good but isn't good for you. When your heart is pure, your decisions become clearer. You'll start seeing things differently because your spirit isn't clouded by confusion. God speaks to the clean heart. The cluttered one can't hear him. That's why peace is priceless. It's proof that your heart is guarded. Guarding your heart also means watching your words. What comes out of your mouth reveals what's living inside your spirit. Speak faith, not fear. Speak life, not doubt. You can't have a godly heart and an ungodly tongue. Sometimes guarding your heart means forgiving quickly. Bitterness builds walls, but forgiveness builds bridges. Don't let offense live rent-free in your soul. Protect your joy by releasing what doesn't belong. Your heart determines your direction. A godly man guards it like treasure because he knows everything valuable in life flows from it. A godly man works like God is watching because he is. Integrity means doing what's right even when no one's looking. You don't cut corners. You don't lie to get ahead. You show up, you deliver, and you honor your commitments because that's what a man of faith does. Your work is a reflection of your character. When you give your best effort, you're honoring God, not just your employer. Too many people want blessings without effort, but God rewards diligence. Excellence is not about perfection, it's about consistency in doing your best with what you have. When you walk in integrity, you attract trust. People start to see something different in you. They may not know it's God, but they'll feel the difference. That's how you become a light in your workplace. Not by preaching loudly, but by working honestly. Integrity may not make you popular, but it will make you valuable. Promotions fade, but a good name lasts. When you live with integrity, God will put you in rooms you didn't even apply for. He blesses those who represent Him well. Working with integrity also means doing right when it costs you. There will be moments when honesty will test your income or your comfort. But remember, it's better to lose an opportunity than lose your character. When you live clean, you sleep peacefully. There's no guilt, no pretending, no double life. That's real success. To go to bed at night knowing you did right by God and by people. A godly man doesn't chase shortcuts, he builds steadily. Because integrity might be slow, but it's never late. God's timing and your character always align at the right moment. When God blesses you, don't let success change your spirit. A godly man stays humble no matter how high he climbs. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's remembering that everything you have came from God's grace, not just your grind. Success has a way of testing people. Some men forget the prayers that got them where they are. But a godly man remembers every tear, every trial, every time God pulled him through. He doesn't let pride take credit for what only faith could have produced. Humility keeps you grounded when the spotlight hits you. It reminds you that blessings are not for boasting, but for serving. You can't inspire people by showing off. You inspire them by staying real. Being humble doesn't mean being silent. It means being wise with your voice. Use your platform to uplift, not to flex. Speak life into others. Remember how lost you once were and help someone else find their way. When pride walks in, grace walks out. That's why humility is protection. It keeps your heart aligned with God's will. The moment you think you don't need Him is the moment you start falling. A humble man keeps learning. He doesn't act like he knows it all. He's teachable, approachable, and grateful. That's why God keeps pouring more into him, because He can trust him to handle it well. Stay low enough for God to lift you, because the man who stays humble will never fall far. He's already close to the ground. You can't call yourself a godly man if you win the world but lose your home. Loving your family means being present, not just being available. It means showing up even when you're tired, listening even when you're distracted, and leading even when it's hard. Your wife doesn't just need your income, she needs your involvement. Your kids don't just need gifts, they need guidance. Love isn't proven in what you say, it's seen in what you consistently do. A godly man builds his family like a foundation. He invests time, not just money. He prays with them, not just for them. He protects them physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because the home is his first ministry and his greatest legacy. When you love your family, you create peace that the world can't touch. You become their safe place. They should feel God's love through how you treat them. A harsh tone can break a heart, but a kind word can heal one. Being a family man doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It means you understand that success starts at home. You can't lead a company if you can't lead your household. Even when life gets busy, make time for them. Your kids won't remember every toy, but they'll remember your presence. Your wife won't remember every gift, but she'll remember how you made her feel. A godly man understands that his first responsibility is not to the crowd, but to the people under his roof. That's where love begins, and that's where legacy is built. A godly man cannot rise without discipline. Discipline is the line that separates those who dream from those who do. You can pray for greatness all day, but if you won't control your habits, your emotions, or your time, you'll keep delaying what God's trying to deliver. Discipline doesn't come easy. It's a daily fight between what feels good and what builds good. Every godly man must learn to tell his flesh no. You can't follow every desire, you can't respond to every temptation, and you can't react to every insult. Discipline means you do what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. It's easy to be motivated for a day. It's powerful to be consistent for a lifetime. The secret to spiritual growth is self-control. You can't conquer external battles if you're losing the internal ones. The enemy knows if he can't destroy you, he'll try to distract you. And that's why you've got to discipline your mind. Guard your thoughts, watch your words, and keep your focus. A godly man trains his spirit the way an athlete trains his body. Discipline will test your patience. There will be mornings you don't feel like praying, days you don't feel like working, and moments you don't feel like forgiving, but you do it anyway. Because discipline isn't about feelings, it's about faithfulness. You don't wait to feel ready. You show up and let God meet you in your effort. Your success in life isn't built on how much you know, but how much you can control. Discipline builds character, and character brings favor. Every time you say no to distraction, you're saying yes to destiny. Discipline doesn't make you rigid, it makes you reliable. People start to trust your word, your habits, your leadership. You become a man people can count on because they know your strength doesn't shift with your emotions. A godly man is not ruled by his feelings, he's ruled by his faith. That's what separates men who wish for change from men who create it. You can't grow in isolation. Every strong man has a circle that keeps him grounded, focused, and accountable. The people around you either push you closer to God or pull you away from Him. You need to ask yourself, are my friends feeding my faith or draining it? A godly man surrounds himself with men who speak truth, not flattery. You don't need people who agree with your weakness. You need people who challenge it. A real brother will pray for you, check on you, and correct you when you're slipping. Iron sharpens iron, and dull company dulls your spirit. Your circle determines your direction. If you hang around men who settle, you'll settle too. But if you walk with men who pray, plan, and pursue purpose, you'll rise with them. The company you keep either keeps you accountable or keeps you average. Building godly brotherhood takes humility. You've got to be willing to listen, to share your struggles, to let others help you grow. Too many men suffer in silence because they're too proud to connect. A godly man doesn't walk alone, he walks with other warriors. When you find men who love God, stay connected. Pray together, dream together, build each other up. Brotherhood strengthens your resolve and protects your heart from isolation. Lone wolves don't last long. Even lions hunt in packs. The enemy's first tactic is always separation. Get you alone, make you feel unseen, and then attack. But when you've got godly men around you, their strength becomes your shield. A godly man builds relationships that sharpen his purpose, because the right circle doesn't just influence you, it multiplies you. A godly man understands that God's clock doesn't tick like man's clock. You can pray today and wait for years, but that doesn't mean God forgot. It means He's preparing. Patience is not just waiting, it's how you behave while you wait. Sometimes the hardest test isn't the problem, it's the pause. We want the promise now, but God wants to prepare us first. If He gave you everything too early, you might ruin it through immaturity. Waiting seasons are not wasted seasons, they're working seasons. Every great man of faith had to wait. Joseph waited in prison. David waited in the field. Abraham waited for a son. Waiting builds faith because it strips away control. It forces you to trust God's plan even when you can't see the full picture. Impatience leads to poor decisions. How many men have settled for less because they couldn't wait for God's best? You can't rush divine timing. The blessing is being built behind the scenes. But so are you. Patience teaches perspective. You start realizing that delays aren't denials, they're designs. God's "not yet" is still a yes, just on a different schedule. While you're waiting, He's aligning the right doors, right people, and right conditions. Don't waste your waiting. Use that time to grow, to pray, to prepare. God never calls you to wait idly. He calls you to wait actively, with expectation, not frustration. A godly man learns to trust God's timing more than his own timeline, because when it finally happens, you'll understand why it took so long. He was shaping you to sustain what He's about to send. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's necessary. A godly man knows that holding grudges chains you to your past. You can't move into your future if your heart is still living in what happened yesterday. Forgiveness doesn't mean you approve what they did. It means you refuse to let it control you anymore. Bitterness poisons your spirit. It steals your joy, blinds your perspective, and blocks your blessings. The longer you hold it, the heavier you become. Some men wonder why they feel stuck. It's because they're carrying things God told them to release. Forgiveness is freedom. It doesn't change the past, but it changes your peace. When you forgive, you give God permission to heal what's broken and handle what's beyond your control. Sometimes you'll have to forgive without an apology. Not everyone will make it right, and not everyone will understand the pain they caused. But forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. You can't walk in purpose while holding on to poison. A godly man forgives because he knows how much he's been forgiven. Every time you think they don't deserve grace, remember how many times God gave it to you. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength under control. Letting go also means releasing regret. You can't change what happened, but you can change what happens next. Don't replay old pain, replace it with renewed purpose. A godly man knows that peace doesn't come from payback, it comes from release. You can't carry bitterness and blessings in the same heart. Choose peace. Fear is a liar that speaks loud when faith is quiet. A godly man learns to tune out fear and tune in faith. You can't claim faith and live in panic at the same time. Either God is who He says He is, or He isn't, and a real man decides to believe Him even when it doesn't make sense. Faith means stepping out when the outcome isn't guaranteed. It's walking into rooms you're not qualified for, but knowing grace already opened the door. Fear will keep you stuck analyzing what faith is calling you to act on. The moment you start moving in faith, the enemy will try to shake your confidence. That's when you remind yourself, God hasn't failed me yet. If He carried me before, He'll carry me again. Faith is not ignoring reality. It's trusting that God is greater than it. Fear is natural, but submission to it is optional. Courage doesn't mean you feel no fear. It means you move forward anyway. A godly man doesn't let fear make his decisions. He lets faith lead the way. Faith grows when tested. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to prove that your belief isn't based on comfort, but conviction. You'll never know how strong your faith is until it's the only thing you have left. You don't need the whole plan. You just need to trust the planner. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. If you walk in obedience, He'll handle the outcome. A godly man doesn't just talk faith, he lives it. He moves like he believes God's word more than his worries. Gratitude changes how you see everything. A godly man wakes up thankful, not because life is perfect, but because he knows he's still blessed. Gratitude is a perspective, not a condition. You can't always control your circumstances, but you can control your response to them. When you start counting blessings instead of burdens, peace grows. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's working. The moment you start thanking God for small things, He starts trusting you with bigger ones. A grateful man doesn't compare his life to others. He understands that everyone has their own race, their own struggles, and their own grace. Gratitude keeps envy out of your heart and contentment in your spirit. Every day, find something to thank God for. Breath in your lungs, family in your home, strength in your soul. The simple things are often the biggest blessings. Gratitude doesn't make life easier, it makes it clearer. When gratitude becomes your habit, Joy becomes your atmosphere. Complaining blocks blessings, but thanksgiving attracts them. Gratitude tells God, I trust you even when I don't understand you. A godly man learns to praise before he receives. Gratitude in the waiting builds faith for the receiving. When you thank God in advance, you're telling heaven, I believe something good is coming. The more grateful you are, the more grace flows. Gratitude doesn't change God, it changes you. A godly man doesn't live to be served, he lives to serve. He understands that blessings aren't meant to stop with him, they're meant to flow through him. When God gives you more, it's not just for you, it's so you can lift someone else. Being a blessing means using your gifts, time, and influence to make a difference. You don't have to be rich to give. Sometimes your presence, your wisdom, or your encouragement is the blessing someone needs. Generosity breaks selfishness. When you give freely, you prove that money doesn't control you. You control it. You can't outgive God, and every time you bless others, he finds new ways to bless you back. A godly man gives quietly. He doesn't need recognition or applause. His reward comes from knowing he made someone's life a little lighter. True giving is when your left hand doesn't need to know what your right hand did. Your blessings multiply when they move. The more you pour out, the more God pours in. Stagnant blessings dry up, flowing blessings overflow. The happiest men are not those who hoard, but those who help. Being a blessing also means speaking life. Encourage people, uplift their faith, and remind them who they are in God. The world has enough critics. Be a man who builds. A godly man leaves people better than he found them. Because every seed of kindness you plant will grow into something eternal. A godly man never settles. He knows that growth doesn't stop when you get older. It stops when you stop learning. You can't live on yesterday's prayers and expect today's strength. Spiritual growth requires renewal daily. Growth starts with humility. You can't grow if you think you know it all. A teachable heart attracts wisdom. Stay curious about God, stay hungry for His Word, and stay open to correction. Every season of life reveals a new lesson. What you learned last year may not sustain you this year. That's why spiritual maturity means constant transformation, shedding old habits, breaking old mindsets, and embracing new truth. Don't confuse comfort with growth. Growth stretches you. It pushes you out of familiar places so you can experience greater faith. A godly man doesn't avoid discomfort. He sees it as training. Keep feeding your spirit. Read, pray, serve, and stay around people who challenge your walk. Growth isn't about religion, it's about relationship. You can't get closer to God by routine alone. It takes heart. Every new level of blessing demands a new level of discipline. God won't promote a version of you that refuses to grow. Stay ready by staying rooted. A godly man keeps evolving, not to impress the world, but to reflect God more clearly each day.